How many of you have goals for your life? If you're a high achiever, and I suspect everyone in this room is, you probably have a mental list or even a written list of the goals for your life. I certainly did. And for a long time, I thought I was steaming along towards those goals with no problems. Until one day I realized that I was veering dangerously off course, and the consequences of that would be enduring and lifelong for me. This is the story of how I came to realize that I needed a better strategy for my own life. Let me tell you how that happened. So I was the editor of Harvard Business Review magazine, and, and one spring day, I was an editor on a deadline, which I can tell you is the most deliberate, focused person that you can ever meet. You have a deadline, the printing press is going to go, you've got to get those pages filled. We were producing a double issue of Harvard Business Review, and I was looking around for just one extra article to fill the magazine. I had heard sort of through the grapevine that a professor at Harvard Business School, Clayton Christensen, had been asked to speak to the graduating class of people about to graduate with their MBAs, and that they had found his speech profoundly moving. Now, I had never met Clay, and I didn't know what he said, but I knew that he is one of the world's most respected management thinkers. So I wasted no time calling his office and asking if I could come over and we could figure out how to turn whatever he had said to the graduates into some kind of an essay for Harvard Business Review. Luckily, he said yes, and I got in my car pretty quickly with my little digital recorder and raced over to the campus. When I was driving over, I was thinking about the traffic, my to-do list, how long I was going to be in his office, when I could get back and start writing. When I left his office an hour and a half later, all of those thoughts had gone, and I was thinking about my own life. As I stood by my car in the parking lot of Harvard Business School, I literally couldn't put my keys in the door and get in. I kept turning over and over in my mind what we had just talked about, what he had said to me, the thoughts he had provided for me that just changed the way I started to think. In the next year, I slowly dismantled my entire life. I resigned as the editor of Harvard Business Review with goodwill on both sides. My husband and I and my 2 daughters, we sold our house, our big suburban house. We gave away almost all of our furniture, gave away our cars, and we moved with the possessions we could carry in suitcases to my husband's native London. Now, you may be asking, what did Clay say to me that day that caused me to do all of that? Well, I will surprise you. We talked about, drum roll, how companies form strategy. Would that do it for you? We talked about how companies form strategy and why so often they get it wrong. And this is why. Strategy is not what a company says their strategy is. It's not some kind of aspiration or vision statement handed down from the C-suite, printed in an annual report, or part of their advertising campaign. Strategy, real strategy, is formed in the everyday decisions that every single employee of that company makes about how they will spend their own time, their energy, and the company's resources. This is the concept of resource allocation. Now, that may sound boring, but I can tell you it's actually profoundly important. Let me illustrate this for you. So if a company says that the new inexpensive model of a new product is the goal to sell this year, and we want to sell more of them and make it a mass product that sells throughout the country, but it costs less, and the company's top salespeople know that they will earn more commission if they sell the old model that costs a lot more, which of those models do you think is going to sell better? If a company says that it believes in long term, it focuses on the long term, and then it picks people for its high potential leadership program, and all of those high potentials are rewarded for their short term success, what message has that sent to the future leaders of that company? If a company says it believes in quality above all else, but then it encourages its employees to cut corners when making a deadline or give in to customer demands that somehow make the product a little less high quality but get out the door in time, is quality that company's #1 priority? Those are all resource allocation choices that are actually forming the strategy of the company every single day by everybody who works there. Strategy is not set from on high. It's executed by everyday decisions that every employee makes. Now, when I thought about that, and Clay and I talked about that, we talked about how that is true in our own lives as well. Your strategy for your life is not what you say it is. As is true for companies, your strategy for your life is formed by the hundreds and hundreds of everyday choices we all make about our own personal resources, our energy, our time. How we spend those resources is the real determinant of the strategy. I realized as I was standing in that parking lot at Harvard Business School that I might have told you my strategy was to be a great wife and mother, sister, daughter. My friends were really important to me, that was the priority of my life. But if you looked at my strategy allocation of resources, you would know that wasn't true. And I knew it too. When you think about it, you might say, I don't have a choice about how I spend my time. I'm a full-time worker or I'm a full-time student. I think we all know in our heart of hearts that we have discretionary choices with how we spend our time. I know I spent a lot or all of my best energy at work, thinking about work, even thinking about work on the weekends. For years, I really didn't want to make weekend plans until I knew if I had to work. So that meant I expected the people in my life to wait to confirm if I was going to join them for the weekend, or I was going to be available for dinner, or we were going to do anything as a family. We would not make concrete plans until I was sure the work demands would not come first. My resources were the most precious thing I had, time. And time is the only commodity you can't create more of. And I was funneling it really heavily into just one place. But I think even more pernicious than that, and this is something we're all guilty of, is we know we can be present with someone, but not be truly present. I thought, how many times have I not looked my children in the eyes as they've been telling me something that was very important to them? How many times did I tune my husband out as he was telling me about his day? How many times did I blather on about myself when I was catching up with my parents, but not stop to ask them how they're doing, how their day was, what's going on with them? I was present, but I was not truly present in the lives of the people who were most important to me, and thus in my own life. How you allocate your personal resources to the relationships in your life is the single most important decision you can make. Now, is this such a big deal? Yes, it's a very big deal, and research will tell us that. The longest longitudinal study of personal happiness is something called the Grant Study. They were studying Harvard sophomores from 1938, men, who all the way to the ends of their life, into their 80s mostly, and they studied all of the factors of how their lives turned out in all of those years, and they determined that the single biggest determinant of personal happiness and satisfaction and physical well-being was long-term meaningful relationships, more than fame and more than money. The same is true in obesity and loneliness. Right here at BYU, they've studied and said that men in middle age are just as physically affected by loneliness as they are by obesity. And if you are dismissing this all as something that people at the end of their lives think about or worry about, let me tell you that research from the University of California at San Diego tells us that we all experience 3 peaks of loneliness in our lives: in our late 80s, in our late 50s, and in our late 20s. You didn't expect to hear that number, I bet. So with that realization, I began to realize that my resources were well out of whack with my own strategy. I'm ashamed to tell you that the first article I ever wrote for the then new website for Harvard Business Review, with my own byline on it, was called Confessions of an Unrepentant BlackBerry Addict. I thought it was really funny at the time. I had figured out a workaround that I could put my BlackBerry at eye level on top of the bookshelf, and I could see when the light turned green, and you would know there was an email for you. So no one knew I was really monitoring it constantly, but I could discreetly check. Less funny, I think, was when I started to realize that my children used to sort of hide behind the door when I came home from work and jump out and surprise me, and every day I'd have to have a different surprise, and they'd find a different way to hide. And then I started to realize that they weren't doing that anymore. I needed to change my life, get back on track quickly. So my husband and I made this extreme decision, very carefully and very thoughtfully, to do a do-over. we decided we wanted our kids to have a different perspective of the world. So London was just a way to sort of reset our lives, somewhat dramatically, but we moved into a pretty small flat with no car, and we spent 2 years there basically just reminding ourselves why we were a family and what was so special about us. I can tell you one thing, when you live in a really small flat, there's no place to escape. So when you get mad at each other or you want to tune someone out, you really can't. You have to find a way to get along. And I think we were probably closer than we've ever been in those 2 years of living within a very small radius of each other. It was an amazing experience. How we spend our energy and resources affects our long-term health and happiness. There is nothing I can think of that is more significant or more important than making the choice to do that. I always say to people, I'm the ghost of Christmas future. Don't be me. Do it better than I did. Don't get to the end of your life and decide you need a dramatic do-over or have regrets or live to your golden ages and think of all the things you could have been or could have done. It's never too late to get yourself back on course. I read recently an expression that said the definition of hell is on your last day on earth, meeting the person you could have become. I hope for you, and I hope for me now, that I will like the person that I meet on the last day on earth. It's not perfect, and it's not easy devoting your resources more fully. I still work, I still love to work, but I do it in conjunction with the rest of my life because I'm very aware of my strategy. It's not easy to do that, and relationships don't pay off for you every day, but I can tell you that they do pay off so richly over the long run. Take a minute and be honest with yourself. Do you know the strategy of your own life? Are you investing in it? Because nothing is more important. Thank you.